Good afternoon again, and welcome to the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce Login and Learn web series. My name is Lori Stinson, and I proudly serve as Vice President of Military Affairs and Leadership Development at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. Now, I would like to introduce our President and CEO, Richard Perez.
Thank you all. I'm excited that y'all are here. Thrilled, of course, to be able to hear from the leaders at Joint Base San Antonio. It's going to be a great afternoon, and we've got a lot of good information, so I'll zip through this really quickly. Before I begin, though, I want to thank our Login and Learn series sponsor, and that is the San Antonio River Authority. Sarah, thank you for your generosity and commitment to the San Antonio River and its watershed. Your flood control work, water quality and maintenance, and restoration of the San Antonio River gives San Antonio a special quality that not every city has. And it's your good work that keeps us on the forefront of conservation and water quality and nature. And so thank you. Your work is important and it's very much appreciated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, San Antonio is proud to be home to the largest joint base in the entire Department of Defense. As Military USA, we have an important responsibility to support and show our appreciation for all our service members, their sacrifices, and their works towards keeping our nation safe. So supporting more than 250,000 personnel with over 200 mission partners spanning 4 counties and 4 congressional districts, it's likely that you, your business, or your family have interacted with at least a few of our invaluable military partners personally or professionally. Critical and essential military missions continue even amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The San Antonio Chamber, of course, is proud to support our military missions, our service members, and of course their families too. We're excited to provide this opportunity for you to hear directly from our military commanders who lead the nation's finest in national support for the COVID-19 crisis, in our local installation support, in flying training, in medical training, as well as top-notch medical services that are a treasure to our San Antonio community and to our military. We are excited to hear from our panelists, and they are Lieutenant General Laura Richardson, Commander, United States Army North, 5th Army; Major General Craig Wills, Commander, 19th Air Force; Major General John DeGoes, Commander, 59 Medical Wing; Major General Dennis Lamaster, Commander of the United States Medical Center of Excellence; Brigadier General Laura Lenderman, Commander, 502nd Air Base Wing and Joint Base San Antonio; and Captain Tim Richardson, Deputy Commander, Naval Forces Support Command. We're going to hear from all of them first, and then, of course, we'll reserve time at the end to get in questions. And as Lori said, please submit your questions so we can have them in the queue and get them knocked out as soon as we get done with the presentations. So in essence of time, we posted all of the commanders' biographies on our SA Chamber Rapid Response website. So I'll just briefly introduce them and we'll get right to the meat of our presentations today. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, our good friend and a great friend of mine, certainly, and military partner, Lieutenant General Laura Richardson, Commander, United States Army North, 5th Army, and Senior Commander, Fort Sam Houston and Camp Bullis. General Richardson will provide remarks on U.S. Army North's critical mission in support of national challenge of COVID-19. General Richardson, we are honored to have you with us today. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Richard. It's really my pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to the Chamber today. And what an honor it is for me to tell you what the Army North has been doing in support of the national COVID response right here from Military City, USA. And so, quite honestly, I have, as the Joint Force Land Component Command, U.S. NORTHCOM for the COVID-19 response, I do have a short video that I want everybody to see because it highlights a lot of the things that happen right here in San Antonio on our military bases regarding the training that happens for our medical professionals, our doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, and our medics. And so these are pictures and a collage on this video travels all over the United States where we have put forces. So with that, let's go ahead and play the video first, and then I'll provide short remarks. The gear that we wear, much like if we were in a chemical or biological environment, we have a suit, we have we have a mask, and we have booties, and we do have all kinds of what we call kit, right, to protect yourself. So that's the PPE in this particular case. And so it's actually very, very similar to everything that we train for.
I would like to thank all service members, all federal agencies, FEMA, and all partners, especially the first responders that have supported us and our nation to make this a successful COVID-19 response. I am so proud of the medical professionals, the doctors, the nurses, the respiratory therapists, the medics. It is just tremendous to see them. And I get to go and visit them and see them on the front lines and see the support that they're providing patients and the much needed support. I think it's a good news story about a lot of the folks that are recovering from coronavirus. And that's the untold story. Well, as I was saying before, Army North is the U.S. Northern Command's designated Joint Force Land Component Command to lead all federal ground forces for the COVID-19 response. And so what we do in this role is support FEMA by matching federal military capability and capacity to FEMA's requests for assistance on behalf of the governors, state, and local officials. Let's go to the next slide. So I do have some slides, too, to keep things going with some pictures as well. We formed 5 regional task forces led by 2-star general officer commanders, 5 of them, to rapidly employ unique military capabilities in support of FEMA. And so these task forces provided the command and control framework, logistics, and coordination responsibilities to allow us to integrate into the whole of nation response. And so on that particular chart, you see a map of the United States, and the different colors are the different areas that those commanders were responsible for employing our Title 10 forces. And so I had a command in the west, one in the center, one in the southeast, the northeast, as well as specifically in New York and New Jersey. And so at the peak of the operation, we had almost 9,000 service members deployed to 14 cities in 9 states. And right now, there are about 6,400 service members still in the Joint Force Land Component Command, as I mentioned before. And it's a joint force where people from the active component, reserves, and the National Guard that have been mobilized. We are currently providing support in New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Let's go to the next slide, please. Our 10 defense coordinating officers and elements are co-located with each of the 10 FEMA regions to ensure seamless coordination with federal, state, and local officials. They have been working nonstop in support of our federal partners since late January, when the DoD started providing support to Health and Human Services for American citizens returning from Wuhan, China, and also the cruise ships. Seems like a long time ago. Next slide, please. In New York,
the Joint Force Land Component Command has fully integrated approximately 800 Army, Navy, and Air Force medical professionals into 10 New York City public hospitals to augment the staff there. And we also have more than 70 soldiers providing the very sacred mission of mortuary affairs support to New York City's Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And our main effort in New York City was transforming the Jacob Javits Center in just 1 week from an empty convention center into a 3,000-bed hospital capable of treating COVID-positive patients. We had about 800 medical personnel from the Army and Navy who ran the Javits Center as an alternate care facility in support of New York to help alleviate the huge burden on the local hospitals. We treated 1,095 patients there in 30 days, and on the video you would have seen the golf cart that had the number 1,095. That was the last patient that was discharged to go home from the Javits Center. So very, very proud of that achievement. Let's go to the next slide, please. All told, across the GIFLIC, we have supported 128 requests for assistance from FEMA, and we had people working in 24 civilian hospitals, 7 alternate care facilities in 14 cities across 9 states with about 3,100 medical professionals. And all of these medical personnel were trained right here in San Antonio, the home of military medicine. As we see the need for federal military forces decreasing in areas, we're working hard to plan for what may be coming next, whether that be COVID Wave 2, hurricanes, forest fires, or earthquakes. We know for sure we'll get hurricanes, and we're looking hard at how we actually provide assistance to FEMA in a COVID environment. It's an honor to serve our country, especially at home in a time of crisis, and we truly appreciate the support we receive from the great people here in San Antonio. Your support of the military stretches far beyond the city limits. It helps people across the entire nation and around the world. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
General Richardson, thank you so much. Laura, you're doing a fantastic job. I can tell you this, I sleep better at night knowing that you and your soldiers and civilians are out there, getting the work done and the serious work done on the front line, supporting us during the COVID-19 national emergency. Truly, thank you on behalf of a gracious and grateful city. Your work is extremely important.
Oh, thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce another talented leader and dear friend of the Chamber, Brigadier General Laura Lenderman, Commander of the 502nd Air Base Wing and Joint Base San Antonio. She'll provide some remarks on how the 502nd Air Base Wing has provided superior installation support and services throughout the COVID-19 crisis, taking care of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, civilians, and their families throughout JBSA. General Lenderman, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. And thanks to Lori for setting this forum up. And thank you, General Richardson, for that great briefing. We do really appreciate everything that Army North has done to lead you, especially yourself, lead us through this effort. So if I could go to the next slide, please. All right, that's next slide. And again, thank you to the Chamber. I just wanted to, before I get going into the details of how the installation responded, I wanted to thank not only the leadership of the Chamber, but also all of your business leaders out there. We know it's been a challenging time. We do appreciate everything and all the services that you continue to provide the men and women assigned to Joint Base San Antonio, especially all the donations that we've received, and all of the efforts that we're going to continue to make this a health and safe recovery. So with that, I see we're on the mission and vision. Again, it's just to remind those of you that might be out there listening that our mission at the installation level is to provide support and services. It's equivalent to a mayor or a city planner. So those are the things that we're responsible for. And so when this crisis kicked off, we stayed very closely linked to how the city was responding and how the county was responding, because very similar responsibilities resided here on the installation. So next slide, please. And so this provides a brief timeline of where we started and where we are today. And it's important to remember that back in February, we were tasked to provide support to evacuees that were coming off from Wuhan province in China and also from the Princess Cruise Lines. And it was a really challenging time at that moment because we just didn't know much about this disease. And we also didn't necessarily, we weren't prepared for it. It was pretty much within 24 to 48 hours respond to this emergency that didn't necessarily involve the city or the county quite yet, or the state of Texas. But what it did do is it actually was a blessing in disguise, because it provided us an opportunity to learn from the experts. So we got to learn from the CDC and the DHHS personnel who cared for the citizens of the American citizens who were evacuated. And we learned a lot of lessons learned. So when the crisis came to our own front door, we could start with a running start versus a crawl. And so that's exactly what happened. So the cruise line mission completed on the 26th of March, and it was shortly thereafter that the crisis became apparent that we needed to restrict public gatherings on the installation. So we canceled the public attending all of the training graduations across the installation. A couple days later, we declared a public state of emergency or public health emergency, and then we started to restrict some of the services on the installation, very similar to what was happening in the city. So again, we were very aligned with Mayor Nirenberg and, of course, the county Judge Wolf and the rest of the leadership here. We initiated health protection conditions, which are similar to but different than force protection. And so this was the first time we've ever had to do that. And we start at health protection 0. And throughout the course, very quickly, we elevated to Alpha, and then Bravo, and then Charlie. And that's where we've remained up until this point. We also restricted the installation to official visits only. That allowed us to be aligned with the stay home, work safe policy that was already in effect in the city. Lots of our population went into telework status, those that could. And then we worked, that's how we worked for the next couple of months until recently. And again, in alignment with the state and the city and the county, we've been able to open up some of our services, especially those focused on resiliency, because this has been a really challenging time, as it has been outside the fence line for our families and for the folks that come to work every day. We wanted to give them an outlet. So since then, we've opened up our golf courses and Canyon Lake and some of the other services that provide the ability for folks to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. And the last piece we wanted to highlight was on 30 June. That's a stop movement policy that was instigated by the OSD at SecDef level. And so what that really means is that people that were planning to move on to the installation or move off the installation, they've been held in place until it's safe to do so. So next slide. So it became quickly apparent when this was ramping up in early March is how do we keep the training pipeline open? And actually, should we keep the training pipeline open? And we were able to work with our mission partners, and a lot of them are here on the line. They're going to talk to you about specifically some of the cautionary measures that they took. But in general, from the installation perspective, we had to provide a recommendation to Air Education and Training Command in particular, but again, in coordination with the Army and the Navy here, is can we safely provide these training resources and keep the pipeline open and not be a health risk to those that are in a very close-quartered environment? And we were able to do so, and it was pretty challenging to do that, but it was also quite rewarding because we're able to keep this pipeline that's so vital to the national defense. And you can see here that these are some of the things that we were able to do right off the bat to modify our operations. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Major General DeGoes. He and I worked very closely along with Brigadier General Wendy Harder at BAMC, and the medical piece of this training pipeline was so critical to our ability to remain mission effective.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me. It looks like the microphone icon is good. So the San Antonio Military Health System is a combination of the 59th Medical Wing based out of Lackland, Wilford Hall, but with a presence throughout San Antonio, and Brooke Army Medical Center. And as General Lenderman said, under the command of Brigadier General Wendy Harder, we are just part of really a robust military medical presence in San Antonio. And I think you could aptly call San Antonio Military Medical City USA, just like Military City USA. We're deep into a transition, according to the law, under the Defense Health Agency, with the goal of becoming an integrated health system. But we're continuing our long-standing partnership with nearly every major civilian hospital in Bexar County, the South Texas Veterans Health Affairs, and as well as the San Antonio Metro Health District. Specifically regarding COVID-19 support of the key basic military training pipeline at Lackland, we quickly adapted our operations to protect and, if you will, insulate the key training pipeline. And this has truly been a team effort of 3 wings, the 59th, the 502nd Air Base Wing under General Lenderman, and the 37th Training Wing under Colonel Jason Janeros that has direct responsibility of basic training and technical training, and really in support of a critical Air Education and Training Command and Air Force mission. Typically, we would vaccinate recruits shortly after arrival for virtually everything, including giving them a shot of penicillin. But with COVID being new and no vaccine or standard treatment, no drug like Tamiflu for like influenza, and it spreads very easily, we had a unique challenge to try to keep the mission going. And while recruits are young and healthy, they come from all over the planet, including some potential COVID hotspots. And while they're on Lackland, they live in close quarters. So it would be really easy for a new disease with no treatment, no vaccination to spread. And unfortunately, at some other basic training sites throughout the Department of Defense, there have been significant outbreaks that have actually stopped training mission. And to date, due to, again, a great team effort, we haven't had any stop in the mission at all. So what did we do? We kind of adopted what I would call a defense in depth and a culture of safety approach to keep the mission going, producing the next generation of American airmen while simultaneously protecting the community in which we and our families live and work. So the depth began at first screening folks at military entrance processing stations throughout the country where a region would muster before they would then get on a plane and come here to San Antonio. They would get a standard DoD questionnaire, and if they answered yes, that they might have symptoms, they didn't ship. We would repeat that questionnaire on arrival at Lackland at the Finkston Reception Center into the gateway to the Air Force. And again, if they answered yes, we would put them into an immediate quarantine and test them if it was required. And a real key to our success has been a culture change that has been executed by the military training liaisons of the 37th Training Wing. And they've focused on safety. And so rather than encouraging a recruit to just drive through and adapt and overcome, they've put a focus on anybody who's got early symptoms saying, hey, go and get seen by our medics. And we evaluated them, and if they required testing for COVID, we did that right away. And we kept them isolated from the rest of the training population until they were better, even if their COVID test was negative. Now, and so General Lenderman was able to find quarters for those airmen to isolate. If they were positive, then our public health folks didn't walk, they ran to find who was a potential close enough contact to the positive and make sure that we would then put them into quarantine. Again, General Lenderman finding them dorm rooms where they could be physically distanced but not socially isolated, that we were still watching them. Our last COVID positives have been on the 20th of April and the 30th of March. So the old-fashioned public health measures that we've taken because of the lack of a drug and treatment have been very effective. We haven't had any trainees admitted to the hospital for COVID. In fact, the only hospitalization we've had since 1 March has been for garden variety influenza in a basic trainee. And so that really happened by good execution of old-fashioned public health measures and great teamwork. We've done some other initiatives to kind of keep the broader Joint Base San Antonio missions going and serve our patient population. first at BAMC and then at Wilford Hall and Randolph, we did drive-through testing. So to protect healthcare workers and the sicker older people that are at higher risk of bad COVID, to do that testing outside of the hospital, we did the tests right while people were in their vehicles. We developed drive-through pharmacy procedures that kept the safety and the checks that prevent pharmacy problems from occurring, but did that within our patients' cars. Another thing that's innovative is we leverage virtual health and telemedicine to safely enhance patient access during the public health emergency and the mayor's stay-at-home order, and also, again, protect healthcare workers. We also participated in multiple live stream virtual town halls to answer questions and get the best information out to our patients to further increase safety and confidence. And so what we're preparing now to gradually reopen care throughout the San Antonio Military Health System, and probably will begin about the 1st of June, opening up operating rooms to our highest priority cases that have been deferred for about 2 months. I should mention that we have 6 airmen, mental health professionals supporting Lieutenant General Richardson, the Joint Forces Land Component Commander in NORTHCOM in New York City right now, dealing with the increased stress of healthcare workers in New York, and actually helping them design a medic or a healthcare worker resiliency program. And so we will remain flexible going forward based on conditions, but I think because of the success, both within the military health system and in San Antonio right now, the city is in really good shape with a very flattened epidemic curve, which has kind of protected capacity of the hospitals throughout Bexar County and allowed us to take care of non-COVID things that in some communities that haven't been able to reduce transmission, it's overwhelmed their healthcare system. And so this is going to be an ongoing challenge going forward, but I think the communication and the partnership with military medicine and the San Antonio the San Antonio medical community is going to serve the citizens well going forward. Thank you for the time.
And thanks, General DeGoes. I appreciate you and your team have been absolutely critical and the cornerstone of our success as an installation. Without that medical team here, and I know that that's you and General Harder have such a great partnership, but needless to say, we wouldn't be here today training airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines without you two working together. So thank you so much for that. My next couple of slides are just going to walk through some of the things that we were able to learn by trial and error, but also innovate. As General DeGoes mentioned, this has been a great opportunity to really learn some great lessons and quickly spread them across not only the Air Force, but also the DoD. One of our training mission commanders, the 2nd Air Force commander, she's able to share these kinds of next couple of slides with all the services. And so first, as General DeGoes described, when folks are screened and they either test positive or we think that there might be a contact or there's a tracing effort going on, our job at the installation level is to make sure we isolate them and watch them potentially for 2 weeks, depending on their situation. And then if they are actually found to be positive, then we have to take care of all of their needs for the next couple of days to weeks until they're healthy again. And so these are just kind of the things that we ended up doing within the installation, was create a Meals on Wheels plan where we delivered meals to the actual dorm rooms. We were all up in the PPE that General Richardson described to make sure that they had their meals delivered to them versus going into our dining facilities. They also had daily medical monitoring, and then probably most importantly was that chaplain and resiliency support, because these were new recruits, sometimes very young people. They'd just gotten into the military, and now they're in a room by themselves. And so taking care of them and making sure that they felt supported and cared for and protected was a really important part of our mission. Next slide, please. All right, and then as we started to learn even more lessons, one of the most important pieces of the puzzle was keeping them not only safe while they're here, but also onto their next level of training. So whether it was just up the road to Shepherd Air Force Base, or if it was across the country to another installation, we worked closely with basic military training as well as general masters to arrange that ground transportation and also the air transportation that landed there at Kelly Field at the Port of San Antonio. And so we're grateful for our partnership there at the port too, because that provided a great capability for us to keep this cohort safe, as safe as they were here, that they continue to remain safe at their next point of training. Our engineers played a critical role in this process. Whenever someone had the indications they may be positive, they were part of the resources that helped us arrange for deep cleaning contracts. So we were able to get in there and make sure that the facilities were cleaned. They also continued to maintain our aging infrastructure, which is not an easy thing to do. And so taking care of that workforce proved to be one of the most important roles that we had. They are extremely critical in a peacetime situation, but in this effort, if we lost an HVAC or we had a pipe burst and one of our dorms went down, we just didn't have the capacity any longer to swing people to another dorm space because we were already spaced out due to the 6-foot separation requirement. So very grateful to the engineers and all of our contractors who kept the installation mission ready. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned the clean team. So when we didn't have a deep cleaning contract, or we didn't require a deep cleaning contract, we also had volunteers, critical augmentees from Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines who came together to deep clean some of those areas using all the required PPE that we learned from the CDC. I also wanted to highlight the fact that we did have mission essential personnel that weren't able to telework due to the requirements of the job. And so we had to keep our child care development centers and our youth centers open to support those individuals. And I do want to make sure that all of the folks in the business community that are caring for the kids right now, for those other city workers and county workers, a lot of gratitude for them to go out and take care of our youth. And I would also ask for those that are on the line, one of the key indicators of our ability to come back and bring people back onto the installation will be the ability to provide safe child care off the installation. So in advance, I wanted to say thank you to all of that community. Next slide, please. All right, and this is something we're really pleased and happy to report that our Army and Air Force exchanges and the Defense Commissary Agency were great partners throughout this. And as everyone experienced outside the fence line, there were concerns about the capacity and the supplies of whether it's cleaning supplies or toilet paper or just food in general. And so we're blessed to have a commissary and an APs here on the installation, and they were able to keep their doors open for us. And thanks to General Richardson for her advocacy, they increased their stock and they kept the lines moving and they kept everybody safe throughout the process, and we're extremely grateful for that. Next slide. And lastly, this is one of my last slides, but I wanted to also thank the folks here on the installation that support our schools. It's incredible what we're able to do when we all converted to distance learning, and not only here on the installation, but most of our children going to JBSA or assigned to JBSA, their parents live off the installation. So I thank not only the Lackland and Fort Sam and Randolph high schools and their superintendents and their staff, but all the 32 other ISDs that support JBSA. I mean, these are other unsung true heroes who kept our distance learning on track, and to all the parents out there who became teachers overnight. Do appreciate everything that they did. But I also want to let everyone know that we do have some graduations lined up, and we have our first one. Actually, Lackland just announced yesterday that they're moving theirs to the 29th of May. So Lackland High School will graduate, and they're able to do an outdoor ceremony because it'll be after the Texas guidelines for that outdoor ceremony on the 29th. On the 22nd, Fort Sam Houston will graduate here, and they have a wonderful ceremony planned for the families. And then on the 30th of May, Randolph High School will graduate. Next slide, please. All right, and lastly, this is I wanted to thank the mayor, and I wanted to thank Gordon Hartman for inviting us to be a part of these various working groups that kept us, again, aligned with the city and their efforts. So thank you all for letting us be a part of your recovery efforts so that we could support you just as you've supported us. Next slide. And this pretty much briefed this slide already. We're in the phase 1 of recovery. And we're looking to continue to open some of our services along with the city and the county and transition to phase 2 as soon as we have guidance from OSD level. Excellent. That's it. With that, now I'd like to turn it over to General Wills. Thank you.
We will now move on to our next speaker. We're eager, of course, to hear from Major General Craig Wills, Commander of the 19th Air Force. As Air Education and Training's prestigious flying training mission, General Wills leads the world-class force that provides top-level training and education programs and support for our airmen. General Wills, we're thrilled that you're here. I know we've had a little bit of technical difficulties, but hopefully we have you on. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Richard. It's a great pleasure to be here. And honestly, I think this is my first chamber event. I've had the good fortune to meet a few of you in person back in the old days when we used to do a lot more in person. And I look forward to meeting all of you in the future when we can do more than elbow bump, hopefully in the not too distant future. So 19th Air Force is a little bit unique compared to what the folks that you've heard from so far. I have the great luxury of being able to sort of water ski off of the great work that Laura and others have done to secure the bases that I operate from. And so most of my focus has been on the installations that fall under 19th Air Force that aren't under Joint Base San Antonio. So if you're not real familiar with 19th Air Force, we have about 17 wings scattered across 12 different states, 22 training locations. And for the most part, if you get flying training in the Air Force, you get it from 19th Air Force. We train, somewhere in the neighborhood, officially, somewhere around 10,000 students a year. And it's important because it really shaped the nature of what we do really shaped our response to the pandemic. The United States Air Force aviation training pipeline is really a high pressure, high volume pipeline. And as many of you know, we've been facing a pilot shortage for quite some time. And so the pilots tend to get a lot of the attention, but it's true across all of our aviation specialties. And so the net result of that is that as this first started to come up, we looked at our options. And what it boiled down to is that if we were to go stop training for a month, essentially for every month we do that, we would lose 200 pilots. And that loss is not something we can actually make up. We're operating at such a surge level in general that we don't have the ability to surge back whatever we lose. And so frankly, it just wasn't an option for us to stop completely. And so we immediately started trying to figure out what it was that we could do. At the staff level, certainly, and when we looked at our functions on the different bases, much like the rest of you, we went into sort of a maximum. We started out in the beginning as all of us were trying to feel our way through this. We started out with a teaming concept. So we split into Team 1 and Team 9. You've heard of blue team, silver team. Some of our bases call them pods, but basically we split into shifts. And then after the first couple of weeks, it became apparent we were going to have to do more than that. And we went to a maximum telework posture on the staff. But out in the flying wings, essentially, they stuck with the pod concept or the teaming concept, and we continued to fly. It required a lot of individual adaptation. As you know, aviation training is one of those things. If you're a single seat fighter pilot getting training at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico, it's easy to maintain 6-foot distance. If you're one of the crew training aircraft like we have right here at Randolph or up at Altus or Little Rock, then obviously you're going to be sitting next to somebody for some time. So we had some great innovation that took place. We figured out a way to wear masks inside the airplanes. Believe it or not, we have a great team down in Del Rio where one of the spouses came up with a mask that has a Velcro tearaway, and there's a place for the boom mic to fit inside. It's really just phenomenal work. And the net result of that is essentially we were able to operate at somewhere between 50% of the capacity at most places, all the way up to some of the fighter bases and the heavy at Altus, almost 75 to 100% of capacity in spite of the pandemic, which has been a pretty important success story. There certainly will be an effect on the number of students we've produced because you can't slow something down like that and expect to meet your normal numbers. But I'm really proud of the efforts that the team has undertaken. One of the questions that somebody texted in related to our infection rates, and I can tell you that we really could count on two hands the number of cases we've had across all of those locations that I've talked about. And while it'd be really easy for folks in my position to say, hey, well, that's great, look what a great job our people did. The simple fact, it's the support of the city that makes all the difference. Our folks live right alongside of you. They commute to and from work. We go to the same grocery stores. We go to the same gas stations. And so I just want to say thanks the approach that San Antonio has taken has really helped us with our mission because it's made it safer for us to operate. Generally speaking, one of the other questions came up is whether we've provided direct support. In the case of 19th Air Force, that hasn't really fallen to us. We, of course, have a lot of airplanes, but Air Mobility Command and U.S. Transportation Command have picked up most of the lift. We have done some internal movement of trainees to keep people out of major lines of communication, major transportation hubs. But we're standing by, obviously, to help when we're needed, but so far it hasn't been required. Some of the ways that we've mitigated the challenge, we went to a 6-day operation most places. So it stands to reason if you cut your flying in half, the more fly days you have, the better. So really for about the last 6 or 7 weeks, most of our pilot training bases have been on 6-day operations. And folks have been great on that front. I talked about the masks and the teaming. Some of the ways we've adapted, frankly, have been things that we had been trying to get done before the pandemic, but we were having a hard time getting people to buy into. And so remote learning is a really good example. Most people were creatures of habit, and certainly I'd rather be sitting in a conference room with all of you or at a restaurant right now. But we've been trying really hard to push the envelope on remote learning. And we had a lot of people that just didn't like it. But it's amazing how motivated people get when they have the prospect of a disease sitting 2 or 3 feet across the table from them. And so we've taught a lot of old dogs new tricks, and we've come up with a lot of great ideas as we look at ways to deliver content remotely, and that's pretty cool. The other thing it's really helped with is, and I'm sure you all are experiencing this in your own lives, when you're forced to kind of go to ground or go back to your house and work from home, and you have to be really selective about which phone calls you make and which business you do, you get a pretty good picture in a hurry of the things you were doing beforehand that may or may not have been as value added as you thought. And so we've had the opportunity to relook a lot of our training events. One of the things that we do, for example, is survival training for the Air Force. We train 50 out of 52 weeks a year up at Fairchild Air Force Base and outside of Spokane, Washington. And the course was 26 training days long, and every single air crew in the Air Force has to go through that. We're constantly backlogged. So we challenged the team, hey, why don't you see if we can find a smarter way to do it? And lo and behold, we found out that we were essentially providing the same exact training to everybody. So if you were working as a VIP support aircraft person, you got the same survival training as if you were going to be a bomber pilot or a fighter pilot or a special operations pilot. That just didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And so we've been able to change the program to make it tailored to the aircraft you're going to. We've cut basically 47,000 training days a year. If you think about that, 47,000 training days. For those of you that are business owners, you know well better than I do the costs and the overhead that goes with maintaining a supply system like that. So that's $3.5 million in direct temporary duty costs, not to mention the pipeline costs of 47,000 days we really don't need. And the best part is we're continuing to produce world-class graduates, which is really the bottom line. So in some ways, I will say there's no silver lining to a pandemic. I don't think there's any upshot to this thing. I'm like all the rest of you. I wish it had never happened. But there is opportunity in here for your Air Force, and we're doing our very best to take advantage of it so we can deliver great value to our taxpayers, and most importantly, we can continue to be combat ready every single day. Somebody asked about resilience, and I'll close there. And let me just tell you that I think when this first started, there was a big fear we had. There's a lot of talk. We've had the suicide rates across the military have been an area of concern for a long time, and they're still an area of concern. When this first started, I think there was a lot of prediction that we would see a huge uptick in that. And thank God we haven't so far as I can tell. But I think that the resilience of our airmen has been really a great success story. And I'm hoping that the same is true outside of our fences. I think part of it could be explained by the fact that we're making a more deliberate effort to check on everybody every day. Ironically, there probably are some people who are hearing more from their supervisors now than they were before, because when you see people every day, you make a lot of assumptions. But when you make that direct effort to contact them, it makes you think a little more. So resilience is something we continue to work on. We're not taking it for granted. But I've been really pleased with how our airmen have responded, and I've been even more pleased with watching how the city has responded. And I'm also blessed, as I mentioned, like the rest of these commanders, I have lots of community partners, and they've all been amazing. So thank you very much for your time today. and I'll look forward to any questions you have.
Thank you, General Wells. We're thrilled that you're here. We're, of course, thrilled to be hosting such an important mission of the Air Force here, right in San Antonio, Texas, at Randolph. What you do is so important to our national security, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate you, and thanks for joining us. We'll now move on to another invaluable Army partner here at JBSA, who only just recently joined San Antonio in January of this year. He provides leadership to another impactful medical mission, that of training, educating, and inspiring our military medical force for the Army. Major General Dennis LeMaster serves as Commanding General of the United States Army Medical Center of Excellence and the 19th Chief of United States Army Medical Service Corps. General LeMaster, we look forward to hearing from you and learning about your team's efforts. Welcome.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, team. Want to thank the Chamber for the opportunity to talk this afternoon. Want to thank Lieutenant General Richardson for leading our national effort in getting after COVID response. Major General J.J. DeGoes for the San Antonio military medical response. My next door neighbor and comrade, Brigadier General Laura Lenderman, on keeping the three bases secure and safe, and of course Mayor Nierenberg for keeping the city of San Antonio safe. Great response as evidenced by the points previous made that we're doing better here than many other places throughout the nation with regard to the spread of COVID. The Medical Center of Excellence, formerly known as the AMED Center and School, has had a long-standing presence here at Fort Sam Houston. And just to kind of recap for an overview for anyone who may not be too familiar, our mission is to train, educate, and all the force modernization work for Army medicine takes place here, as General Richardson mentioned in her comments. So if someone's in a medical field in the Army, they pass through Fort Sam Houston at some point, usually on the front end of their career. Roughly a staff of 2,000 folks, and if you add their family members, it's around 10,000. We have around 4,300 students right now at Fort Sam Houston, annual student load of 37,000. To give you an idea of the depth and breadth of Army medicine, of its officer specialties, 104 different specialties, and of its enlisted specialties, 24 different specialties, and the second largest military occupational specialty for the enlisted corps is the combat medic, right behind the infantrymen. 3 enlisted degree programs, 5 master degree programs, 9 doctoral programs, 96 civilian education programs, and an international program that's participated by 54 countries with roughly 200 students annually. So it's a pretty busy organization. I think I have one slide. I'm not sure if it's up, but our mission continues is the top bullet on the slide, and we are now aligned underneath Training and Doctrine Command. We were reapportioned from Medical Command to under Training and Doctrine Command. And the key thing is as others have mentioned, is the training pipeline. Army has a concern about readiness, and it's about training soldiers and getting them to their first unit of assignment. And we did a pause, Training and Doctrine Command, and figured out how are we going to continue the training in a socially distant enabled construct. We've gone to calling it tactical dispersion. And we took a tactical pause. The pipeline slowed down a bit. We went into a screening mode where we were screening our soldiers. They were symptomatic testing, and if they had to be isolated, they went into the 14 days isolation. And then Training and Doctrine Command, we got to where we had to move. The bases were stacking up with trainees, and so we had to move them. So they went to a sterile pipeline, if you will, or as sterile as we could possibly make it, where soldiers were screened before they left. They got on either an aircraft or a bus. There was 50% capacity, so they could spread out in the conveyance. And it was wiped down, disinfected. And when they land, they were screened, and they were moved to their barracks and screened again. And to speak for Training and Doctrine Command, over 10,000 soldiers moved, of which the Medical Center of Excellence has moved over 1,000. Not one single ill soldier yet. Knock on wood. And we have to continue that because, as all the services representatives have indicated, a huge readiness component here for the Department of Defense. Some of the things we've done to spread out, to get after social distancing, the 6-foot distance, the cloth mask. We even went we went to our class, we went to split shifts. Some of our classrooms are not optimal, and we had soldiers crammed in there. We split them out, extra burden on the instructors, but guess what? All of a sudden we found our test scores started going up. And because we had a lower student to instructor ratio, and you had some more one-on-one instruction being conveyed. That was one of the positive things that has come out of this. TRADOC right now is looking at a 2+8 concept for as we continue to train, and they're going to turn on the pipeline full stream here in the ensuing weeks. But when a soldier first gets into a basic combat training after they come in from their initial entry, their MEP stations, they go to BCT. They'll be in a 2-week kind of a socially distant enabled training environment, everything spread out, and then after that safety bubble's been established around them, they'll go into the regular 8-week training program where they'll be allowed to get a little closer and not so confined and restricted with regard to the preventive measures because they're already in the safety bubble. And then they'll get shipped onward to their advanced individual training site in a similar means. All the time we're doing the training all the testing, and the Army's testing capacity is increasing significantly so that we can test the force and get a sense for how we're doing. And of course, as General DeGoes mentioned, the capacity here in San Antonio is huge with regard to taking care of anybody that gets sick. So far, the Medical Center of Excellence, I think I already mentioned, 0 active cases of COVID, and we want to keep that. Our civilian teammates have gone to a telework construct, and I tell you, we haven't really, the op tempo is maintained, and I think that, 3 things that we'll never see, that we'll see differently in the future is I think we'll never work the same way again, we'll never educate the same way again, we'll go to a distributive learning construct, and then I also think I'm envisioning massive investment in our IT infrastructure worldwide, simply because we don't always have to drive to the office and sit there in order to be effective. I think the third bullet there, I have no second wave. This gets to readiness, and I think we are aligned to General Lenderman's guidance. We're thoroughly integrated. That we will, whatever the JBSA guidance is, we will be doing it lockstep, arm in arm with them. Because we do not need a second wave. We do not need a spread of COVID within our ranks because this all gets to readiness throughout the entire force. So we'll be doing our piece. Rest assured, we'll take a very phased, deliberate, and conservative approach that's aligned with the larger community. Sir, thank you for the opportunity to contribute today. This has been very informative. Thank you.
General Master, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us, and indeed the slides were up, and so followed your talking points perfectly, so thank you. We're comforted to know that your mission continues, and that, of course, the critical role that you all play with soldier readiness and keeping our soldiers prepared is extremely, extremely important. Congratulations on your track record of no one sick. That's fantastic. Very, very excited and appreciative. Our final panelist today is Captain Tim Richardson, Deputy Commander of Naval Medical Forces Support Command, which took the place of Navy Medicine Education, Training, and Logistics Command in October of 2019. We are excited, of course, to hear how this command is providing the best medically trained, educated, and logistically prepared team to support the Navy warfighter, especially amidst the current challenges. Captain Richardson, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Captain Richardson, can you hear me?
Yes, we got you now. Yes, please proceed. Thank you.
I got 2 lines going. Can you hear me on this line?
We can. Yes, we can.
Okay, you tell me. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Captain Tim Richardson. I'm the Deputy Commander for the Naval Medical Forces Support Command. Admiral Davison, the Senior Naval Officer for San Antonio area, is retiring later this month. I'm her deputy and will be assuming command responsibility until our new flag officer arrives. It'll be approximately 2 months. Here in the JBSA area, we've got roughly 20 Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard commands and units. This consists of over 2,500 sailors, Marines, Coasties, reserves, and civilians. In addition to the ship's company, there's roughly 1,600 Navy students on board at any given day. Also housed at JBSA, we got Navy's 2 largest schoolhouses, our core school, and our MA school. Concerning the COVID-19, the Navy has always recognized the criticality of protecting our training pipeline, and the Navy did not stop our training pipeline. At the onset, we implemented mitigation strategies, such as checking every student, every staff member for fevers, for illness, etc. If they had any symptoms present whatsoever, we immediately removed them from ship's company, not to affect anybody else. The goal is, and always has been, protect the service member and their families and execute our mission. But protecting a ship, it's an all-hands evolution. And our ship includes the JBSA and our community. So only a joint effort, not just with JBSA, but also with our San Antonio partners, would provide success. So the Sea Service is aligned to follow the installation of local guidance. The teamwork, we think, has proven successful in protecting both our ship, our shipmates, the warriors, and their families. Now as we prepare to return to work, we're taking the same approach. Proactive, staying aligned with the mission and our local partners, and focus on safety first. We've identified and will implement lessons learned due to the COVID-19. It includes a protracted use of face coverings, social distancing, enhanced teleworking. We've got advanced medical modeling and simulation. We're adding distance learning and alternative learning techniques and methods to achieve the mission safety. In closing, we do appreciate the JBSA team and our community leaders for the guidance they provided. The posts and the community support, that's what's really ensured the mission success for the Navy and the sailors here. So thank you, everybody.
Captain Richardson, thank you so much. It's great to know that our Navy continues to keep our service members ready to support the Navy and Marine Corps mission through your team's superior efforts. Appreciate you sharing and joining us today. So we are getting right at the end of our program, but we've got just a couple of quick questions, and I'd like to just take a moment and maybe ask one or two just to make sure that we get to be able to share some information with you. I think I'd like to start with General Richardson, if you're available still. There's an interesting question here about innovation. The question is, does Army North have an innovation detachment similar to the Air Force's AFWorks? Specifically interested in information to support the COVID response.
So I would say while Army North does not specifically have an innovation detachment, we do have that up in the not too far away in Austin, Texas, at the Army Futures Command, and they're doing all kinds of things that they're looking at and reviewing and those sorts of things in relation to the COVID-19 response. I would just say, just for our own mission, we continue to plan ahead, and as I mentioned, the hurricanes and the wildland fires and the earthquakes. Puerto Rico continues to have earthquakes every day. You know, they had the major earthquakes there in January and in the southern part of the island. So we watch that very, very closely as they continue to have that. And then obviously with hurricane season starting on the 1st of June, it's very imperative that, you know, we think through all the possibilities of what does it mean to respond to a hurricane in a disaster in a COVID environment, and what are all the things that we need to have, and so not to impede the type of response that we're able to provide. So anyway, rest assured that we're working this very hard and doing all the planning necessary to make sure that we're ready.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question, and I'll throw this out to the entire group. This is a broad question, and it's a good one, though. We are seeing, what are you all seeing as the greatest need within JBSA and all of the commands that are joining us here today? There are many businesses that want to help with veterans, help with spouses, help with families, and help with, of course, folks that are in uniform now. Can you talk about what are some of the things that you all need right now, the hardest things you need?
From our perspective, first of all, we appreciate the donations that we received, again, from the city and from individuals, from businesses across the board. Extremely grateful for everything that people have done to step up and support the folks at JBSA. I would say from our perspective, one of the more immediate needs would be childcare and youth programs this summer. That's going to be critical for us to be able to bring people back to work in greater numbers as safety permits. We've been extremely grateful for the support we have received to date in that area, especially on the installation, but we just want to stay in lockstep with the folks downtown. And then probably the best thing that folks can do for us is to follow the safety precautions that are in place and wear your masks, social distancing, and continue to make the city as safe as possible and the county as safe as possible. And that will help us continue to execute the mission on the installation because so many of our members live off installation and come on to work. And so with that, I would say support for the community, the guidelines that are already in place would be the greatest need. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, so we've got a whole bunch of other questions, and so we'd like to forward those to the appropriate person and ask you to answer them. We've got a website called sachamberrapidresponse.org. We'll post the question and then the answer once we get it there so that folks can understand and be able to enrich themselves with that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our panelists, of course, for joining us. It's an honor to host you all today. A lot of great information, and this is going to be one of other like it. There's such an interest in the things that you all do at JBSA, all of the missions, and we really like to get that information out, not only for our businesses to be able to assist in what they do, but for the larger information for our community. There's so many people that really don't have a strong idea of what happens at JBSA, and so our goal is to be able to educate and, of course, connect businesses to the opportunities. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll say thank you for joining us. We're thrilled, and we stand adjourned.